Hi, I'm Anais Solison. Welcome to the Shareable Wave. This is a podcast that is devoted to having conversations with people who are bringing new innovations into many areas of our everyday environments in life, business, education, creative arts, you name it. Right now, our world is exploding with innovation, and not all of it is technical. So we're very happy to be with you today. This is my co-host, Elise Stone, and our guest is Bill Prinzivalli, and we're thrilled to be introducing the topic of the art and skill of both comedic and dramatic improv, and how Bill is creating a shareable wave, bringing his experience. He's got a lot of experience in business and in improv, and he's bringing it to the business environment and other environments as well. So we're delighted to have Bill with us today to talk about improv. Bill, welcome, and thank you so much for taking some time to spend with us today.
Oh, thank you, Annie. It's my pleasure. Probably weeks before that, just in terms of just life situations. And I was meeting new friends at the time, having been recently divorced. So he said, "Have you ever tried the acting community?" So I said, "No." I said, because his former wife was a director on Broadway. He said, "I think you would find that enjoyable." I said, "Look, I'm very self-conscious. I have no desire whatsoever to have anything to do with theater." So I just shut that down immediately, you know, as I do a lot of things. Just no is the first answer. That's always a safe answer, isn't it? So of course, then what happens is a week later, I get an email talking about, it says Tantra on stage. It said, "See what it's like to be an actor for an evening." And I was familiar with Tantra with my former wife, and I practiced it. And I said, well, that's interesting, because they talk about making a connection and communicating clearly and getting into a scene. And it says, just see what it's like to be an actor for a day. So I felt like this was something I could not say no to, especially given my friend's recommendation like just a week prior. So I went there with quite a lot of trepidation. But to my surprise, it was fabulous. We had a couple of hours where we connected deeply with our partners. There were 6 people in that class. And by the end of that evening, we were doing improv scenes with deep connections and deep emotional feeling. So that was intense, and I was ready to walk out the door. And she says, "Oh, by the way," she said, "we're doing a show on Wednesday." She said, "I know you don't want to be in the show, but you know, my mentor is coming in for the weekend, and I think you'll like him. He's a good old Italian boy from New York. You guys will get along." So I said, "Maybe." Right. So Saturday, she called. I had nothing planned that day, so I said, "Fine." It turned out to be a great day, and I said, "Good, Carl, thank you very much. I'm leaving." And he says, "No." I said, "Come back tomorrow." He says, "Carl," I said, "Look, I'm you know." So I said, "Fine." So I went back the next day, and I said, "Okay, Carl, thank you very much for a nice weekend." So he says, "Are you going to do the show on Wednesday?" I says, "No, what are you, nuts?" I said, "I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, I just went to a couple of your classes." He said, "What do you got to lose?" He said, "Half the people like you, half the people won't." He said, "Do this for yourself." I looked at him, and it just hit a chord. I said, you know, how could I not say yes to this? I mean, I would regret this the rest of my life. I mean, I take 2 classes. They want to throw me on the stage in New York City. So I said, fine. Needless to say, I was petrified all week long. And but I finally did the class on that Wednesday. Not the class, but the show on Wednesday in the city. And since then, I've found it very compelling. It's much deeper than I ever thought it would be. Getting into characters and exploring yourself, and so I've been here ever since.
So you're working with an established improv group right now, then? You are?
Yes, I worked with that original company, which is the Open Door Acting Company, the Upper West Side in Manhattan, and I worked with them from 2012 to last year. And this past year now, I'm studying and performing at the Pit, which is a pretty famous place. There's 2 great places, and they have a great program. 6 levels of program. They'll teach you improv, comedy, singing, etc. I mean, it was a real, these are the places where like Tina Fey, Asif Manvi, and then those type of folks come from. So the program is fabulous. I'm in the middle of it right now, and I love it.
So when's your next show?
Actually, in a couple of days. The 30th is one show, and the 28th is another one. I'll check the calendar the Thursday before. The 30th was the original plan for our show, our class show. This is the level 3 class, and we're putting on a show the 30th, and then the Thursday before that as well. So we're putting on 2 shows, September.
That's fantastic. You know, you've come a long way, seems, since 2012 in the way you saw improv and work with improv and where you are now with it. You know, how has this improv affected your life and become this awesome shareable wave for you?
Yeah, a great question. I mean, the first several years that I was there at the Open Door Acting Company, I was just exploring myself and all aspects of myself, right? Because that's what it is. Whether I'm playing, you know, a straight man, a gay man, a woman, a murderer, a killer, a homeless person, etc. I played all these characters, and first of all, I first became to understand these characters as I tuned into them and explored them. And I said, oh, so first of all, there was a better understanding of those people, which are all parts of ourselves, right? I mean, so that was fascinating. But then I thought I was complete with that until I did a program here at the university. I was finishing up an MBA program. For some reason, I was driven to finish this up. I did 90% of this MBA program 100 years ago, right? And for some crazy reason, at this late age, I was driven to take those last couple of credits to finish it. You know why. So during that process, I was doing an independent study with a professor, and the subjects that we were working on, he knew that I was interested in business and spirituality, and that's been my goal forever, and that I was writing a book on it, etc. And so the dean directed me to speak to this professor who's in charge of sustainability at the university. And he said, Billy, this is great, but you don't want to take a class. Let's do an independent study. So the first one we did was on sustainable organizations, which are basically conscious organizations. And I was fascinated by that because even with all of the spiritual work I've done, I didn't realize how many organizations out there now are really incorporating many modern and conscious techniques. Like there's some companies that have no hierarchical structure, where people come and go as they please. Where they set their own salaries. I mean, some of these things are phenomenal. I mean, I come from the old school business world and I'm looking at this and how does this work? But so we studied that. And in his view, if corporations, and I know this is a little off the track of improv, but it's an important point, I think. In his view, if corporations don't start serving society as they were originally intended, and just maintain their goal as to make a profit in any way, shape, or form, that is not sustainable for society. Because society is not being served, and the money that these corporations will make has to come from somewhere. If it's not producing something or helping society, it's not sustainable in the long run. So last semester we did an independent study on that, sustainable and conscious organizations. And at the end of that process, he found out that I do improv in the city. And he said, well, wait a minute. I said, we actually, you know, look at improv in the management world in education. I almost didn't believe him, actually. But when we talked about that, I said, all right. So what we did was this next semester, the last one, we did a study specifically on that. Even though he knew little about it, we worked together on that. So I read many books and I studied what improv has been studied at the university level. And there it's, you know, it's very heavy, as you can imagine. And they mostly look at jazz because some professors, you know how to play jazz, and that was the extent of which they went. So I went a lot further, of course, and got into the the theater world as well. And I tried to bridge the gap. So I created that. So to answer your question, I know it's a long way around this, but to answer your question, how has this moved me into the wave? I went to the university just to finish a degree. and I came out with a whole new career. I mean, basically, I have a whole new set of principles that I want to teach, which is basically taking the benefits and principles of improvisation and employing it into the business world. I have a website that'll be ready in about a week or two. And as you probably know, I do consulting, and I have clients there, but I will add this as additional workshops. And what I really like about this is that it's important. I think people will take to it. It seems to be pretty active right now and interested. And it's sort of a subversive way of introducing spirituality. Because if you look at these benefits, listening skills, connection, being authentic and truthful, I mean, these all have to do with spirit and the heart. And so even though I might not be teaching, literally spirituality in business, which I'm not sure what form that would take, in a sense, I am doing that. So I'm really excited that this roundabout way of events has brought me to where I want to be. And I know it's the right place because I'm just so excited about it.
Oh gosh, that was amazing, and congratulations on starting your whole new wave. I've been really blessed to start my whole new life as well, having done work with Anais, and I've been a business owner before, and now she's in business, so I'm going to toss it back to her. And I just really want to say I love what you said about your heart space, because the most important gift that I've learned from her and walking in my life is that when it comes from the heart, it's just so fantastic. It just brings you this, we call it bliss, blissings, so all right, Anais, take it away.
Okay, so that's great background information for everybody who's watching. And in this video, when we're sharing, there will be information on how to get in touch with Bill. If you visited the page that we constructed, there was a link there for you to download a very lovely guiding document around improv that he generated. And you can get in touch with him, and this may spark something in your world that just expands the wave and allows you to move forward in a way that you might not have thought about before. So we'll make sure that you're able to be in touch with Bill and facilitate that in any way that we can be helpful, because we know what it's like to have the wave go around. And we call that, in our world, a conscious co-creation. And that's the heart of my business and my work, is how we educate people and provide them with tools and resources to move forward as conscious co-creators in whatever they're doing. All right, so now we're going to get into some really interesting specifics here about the structures of improv and the ways and I don't know, Bill, if you know, maybe I'll ask this at the end, but this is kind of an interesting thing. I'm always curious to how something gets started. However, let's start with the yes and technique, which you also describe in this wonderful paper that you shared with us, the make your partner great technique. And there's the comedic approach to improv, but there are other approaches. And in the conversation that we've had, you've shared that there's another approach, which is that I would call igniting creative conflict. Now, a lot of people would think of that as dramatic conflict, but you can go deeper than that and move down the drama into the actual creativity of what tension is trying to be addressed and solved. But first, let's talk about yes and. Would you describe?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yes and is the traditional and basic rule of comedic improv. It basically means the two parts. The yes means whatever your partner says, you have to say yes to, meaning you never deny it, you never invalidate it, and you never shut it down. All right, you always accept whatever they say. So if they say, Bill, are you drinking again? You can't say, oh no, I don't drink. No, I must accept that. And so I must accept the fact that I'm drinking again. The and part is, now I give something back to my partner. Now, if you notice, even that first comment, they gave me something, right? They didn't ask me a question. All right, and that's another rule of improv. You know, don't ask a question, because if you ask a question, if they say, Bill, how are you doing? Well, now I have to create something. I have to create an answer. So they're giving me something right off the bat. Bill, you're drinking again. So they're giving me something, so now I have to accept that. That's the yes part. And then the and part is to build on that, which could be something like, yes, I know I've had a stressful day. I'm really sorry. I just broke down. I have to build on that. And then they would build on that, and vice versa. And it would just keep building and building. So you're always giving to your partner, hence your original partner, make your partner great. You're always trying to set up your partner. It's not about you. If it's about you and your ego, the whole thing falls flat. It's always about giving to your partners. That's the yes and.
Well, for any of you who haven't figured this out yet in life, this is a very good strategy for general success in life, in any area. And that's why when Bill talks about the skills, you're going to understand some of the skills that are required to reach that centered place where you can step into yes and. Yeah, and it's a practice. Okay. Really, yes, and whatever it is. Okay, so then we have, I just, but I'm not going to do it. I'm tempted to just throw something out there and we play with it, but I won't.
Go right ahead, it's improv.
You must be reading my mind, Anais, because I'm thinking, let's do an improv, but no.
We probably will before all this is said and done.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
Okay.
Fun.
Yeah, because it just, and I like to think about the jazz of it, because part of the experience that I have with yes and in life is that it's a kind of a jazz that you're doing with the energies that come in and are part of who we are and what we do and how we do it, and what we can say yes to. I once wrote a little ditty about that. What can I say yes to? Be a mess to, right? You gotta be able to take a risk. And that's where I think these other skills come in that Bill's gonna share with us in a minute. So now let's talk about the dramatic conflict approach, which begins with no. You say no and I would go no but go ahead.
Yeah, no, there's also a yes but. Which of course in traditional improv they say is a no, it's because it's really a no, it's sort of yes, I hear that, but I don't like it type of thing. So that's sort of a no. But so the yes and works nicely in that, okay, you're building with each other, and it since there's no filters, I mean, you don't have to worry about consequences like if you were talking to your boss. What you do is you have an agreement that we're just going to let this fly wherever it goes. And it could go to some crazy places. It could be outrageous comedy, or it could be totally flat. But there's an agreement between the two people. Let's just let it rip. Okay? So that's yes and, easy. Now, but if there's another form of what I call the acting part, which is improvisational acting. And in acting, if you want to do a 10-minute scene with someone, it's tough to just have comedic banter back and forth. It's hard to keep that going, right? But drama is not, because drama is in life everywhere, all right? Any kind of conflict. So in that style of improvisational acting, I'll call it, one person will ask something from another person. We're trying to create conflict. So an easy way to create conflict is to ask somebody, like something like, Anais, please, I need $20,000 or I'm going to lose my house. Please help me. And of course, you have to say no, because if you say yes, the scene is over, right? So you, in a sense, say no, I can't. But you do it in a very connected way. We're both very connected, and you have a lot of options on how you could say no. You could be angry, all right? You could be vulnerable. You could be sad, guilty, whatever. And you'll start off with something. Oh, Bill, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And then I would, of course, go into deeper desperation. But Anais, I really need it, type of thing. And then maybe you would go into a different emotion. So what we're both doing is I'm exploring all the different ways I can make a request from you. I can be vulnerable, angry, etc. I can go through all the emotions and explore them. And you, on the other hand, can, in the same way, can do the same thing, which is explore your emotions and reactions to all of this. You know, you might start saying, "I'm sorry, I can't," but then as I push it, you might start to get angry at me and saying, "Hey, you know what?" You know, so, and we create drama, and in that improvisation, we don't know where it's going to go. All right, because we have all these emotions at our disposal that we want to have in our toolbox that we practice and warm up ahead of time, and go deep inside to see which emotion is really true for us in that moment, and to be authentic about it. And that authenticity could be comedic, it could be anger. We don't know what it's going to be, but that's why it's about self-assessment and self-exploration. And so that goes back and forth, and that scene can last 5, 10, 20 minutes, and it could go in one place from comedic to another place, you know, loving, another place anger, just as any, you know, human interaction that's struggling can go. And in that process, you really explore yourself, and if you're authentic with yourself and your partner, which is what we're trained to do, an audience will see this and really be compelled, because they will identify with these feelings as they're universal, and they will sometimes have cathartic experiences because of it, as will we. So it's a whole different form, but it's quite deep and quite remarkable.
Right. So I think this is interesting, because the dramatic conflict approach for me, it just is experience in life in all ways. The conflict, I have found the resolution of conflict can take the form of drama, and that's the path of resolution that most human beings are familiar with. I think one of the interesting things about spirituality is introducing another possibility to the resolution of conflict, which has to do with shifts in consciousness. So you go from shifting your gears emotionally to allowing the emotions to shift your consciousness.
Yeah.
And the quality of authenticity and relatedness that opens in those dynamics isn't going to produce drama. So people would never go see it. Because what it will do is it will open up the pathway for a really clear and conscious resolution of what previously had been an unconscious dynamic that one or both parties were not aware of.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. A couple of things come to mind when you say that. That yes, if you just perform and just have a conscious resolution with no drama or compel, yeah, it's not entertaining. But what I like about what you said is that what happens during that process is we get to explore each of those emotions, whatever they might be, and in going through those emotions, we clear them, get past them, which allows for the deeper, higher vibrational consciousness to emerge, because otherwise it's blocked by all of the emotions beneath it. So that process does work very nicely.
And it's really helpful, because one of the things we talk about in our work is recognition of the pain body, what we call the emotional pain body, which is generated by our social selves and culture.
Right.
And so improv is a wonderful way to become really conscious of your social self and to see where your emotions are artificial boundaries that you're afraid to move through, or that you're afraid to push against or have someone else push against, and the incredible complexity that we human beings have in terms of how we feel.
Yeah.
And what we generate with those feelings. It's fascinating. It's fascinating stuff. It's just fascinating.
It is, and you get to explore different characters within, if I can call them that, or at least different emotions that we don't get a chance to explore in everyday life. I mean, everyday life, we're working, and at work, you know, you do your thing, all right? Are there emotions? Not very many. And you come home, you have your life. But where else can you really emote fully, in full anger, as in an improv scene, or execute or explore any of these emotions in an extreme way, which is not always appropriate in the natural daily setting. So in that regard, it's a wonderful exploration, right? Because as children, right, you think about a young baby, their emotions are all over the place, right? Because they're pure, right? But then as we get into society says, well, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do that. So we narrow it until we're in this box where only these emotions are appropriate. Well, in improv, it's great. You explore these other ones and break those barriers and feel free and understand who we really are. And then in life, we can be more authentic, more open, more heartful, with less of those veils of protection that exist.
Yeah. Okay, so this is great because it's a nice segue into the question I have about embarking on the emotional journey. Yeah. And I think that happens in comedic improv as well. You're still on an emotional journey. It's water ice instead of beef. I don't know. But anyway, can you share a little bit about what you're doing now and the way that you're exploring and still learning about feeling the energetic connection? I feel that is a physical body-based experience.
Mm-hmm.
You can't think a connection.
Right. Yeah. So a couple of things come to mind with that. Number one, with improv, people tell me, oh, it's about thinking on your feet. I'm saying, no, it's actually not about thinking at all. In fact, if you stay in your mind, you won't go anywhere. You'll have one or two quick lines and that'll be it. Said you really have to connect with the heart. All right, you have to make a connection with that person. Otherwise, you will not be able to sustain any sort of conversation improvisationally. So that connection is important no matter what type of improv you're doing. And if you think about it, especially if you go on stage, that's sort of the most dramatic thing. You go on stage, you're with the person, right? You and I and Ace are on stage. We have no lines, right? So if we don't look at each other and if we don't connect, we've got nothing. And that connection has to be a deep connection too. So in other words, I have to feel you, not just listen to your words, all right? It's the deep listening that's critical, because we even have practiced in different improv classes using one words like I hate you, but with a loving energy behind it, right? So, and how many times have people said, you know what, they told me that, but I didn't believe what they said, right? So the issue is that everyone, either consciously or unconsciously, will understand that there's a mismatch there, especially if it's the audience. So as the actor, you really have to determine the sentiment beneath the words and respond to that. Because if you don't, there'll be confusion between you and between the audience, because somebody will know, and they won't know consciously what's going on, but saying, something's not right. So how can I do that? The only way I can do that is to really connect with you, to get back to your original question. So I have to look you in the eye, open my heart, connect with you, and then whatever you say, I will feel and not just hear the words. And then I can respond from that. Then what I have to do, of course, is feel my reaction. And am I angry? Am I fun? What kind of reaction am I getting? Am I joyous or loving? And self-assess, and then be authentic in terms of my response back to you, because that's my offering to you. I don't want to offer you nonsense. I want to offer you something real, and then vice versa. So that deep connection is critical. If you don't have that deep connection, it's just not going to work.
Yeah. Again, so much about, real life, right? So much about this. Yeah. And so much about the work environment and how we're making choices. Not work environment, but, you're bringing this into business, but our social environments and our important relationships, because you have to come from a basis of what's my commitment what am I committed to when I show up with my connection? What am I committed to?
Yeah.
who am I committed to? Right? You gotta come with some core stuff to this. You can't come with an empty bag. You really can't come with an empty bag. So yeah, so that's a really good kicking off point about feeling the energetic connection. And when we go into feeling the energetic connection from the heart space, from my experience as a healer and a life coach and doing the work that I've done, that opens up you to information and energy that could be incredibly uncomfortable and incredibly frustrating. And so that being able to kind of just relax, I think a big part of this is also a really interesting quality of relaxation, which you can tell us more about. So freeing your imagination within the communication that you're having. Sometimes, tell me what you think about this, you can have a dissonance. Someone is saying something, but there's a dissonance emotionally. And when we are open here in the heart connection, I find what's a possibility is a kind of a generous imagination opens up. And that generous imagination then returns something in the dynamic with a quality of communication that is liberating.
Yeah, beautifully put. Yes, so a couple things there to answer the question is yes, your open heart will do a lot of things. Number one, it will connect to your partner. They will feel heard, all right? So they will feel comfortable with you. You will be able to find your deeper truth in terms of what you're feeling about their comment and your reaction. And by doing that, you're opening up to higher energies of inspiration, creativity, which come through in improv, because the mind is not in the way, and any emotions of self-consciousness or doubt or whatever are not in the way. So when you put all of that aside, creativity is something that can really emerge. And this is one of the things that we talk about in improv, especially in one of the examples I use is like in a think tank, all right? One of the big rules of improv is that there are no mistakes, right? And that's an amazing concept, no mistakes. How could that be, right? Well, they teach that because if, and we have exercises that we do in warm-ups that are impossible to get right, you know, group exercises. So, and then when somebody makes a mistake, we all cheer. And that goes on continually because they make the game more and more complex, so you just cannot get it right. So you learn, okay, mistakes are okay. Because if you don't do that, if you're worried about mistakes, then it means you're limiting yourself, you know, and what's going to happen is you're not going to get full creativity. So in some places that's totally appropriate and important in businesses, such as the research labs or think tanks. You know, they got to be creative and think out of the box, right? Because they have to discover something new. So the traditional left brain mind hasn't created it yet. So they've got to go somewhere deeper. So they go all over the place, and not only are they allowed to, but they're encouraged to. All right. Whereas if you're working on an assembly line, for example, and everything is very, very, you know, strict in terms of computational and calculated, you know, there's little room for creativity, although there's some. So there's quite a variation. But what you're pointing out is exactly how you get there. Yes, I mean, you know, open your heart, you're connecting with your partner, and that opens you up to possible creativity that you can offer your partner. And sometimes I've said things that I said, wow, where did that come from? And my partner picked up on that, and then you just move, and you both just raise each other tremendously. It's an amazing experience.
Yes, it's a beautiful thing when that happens. And I think that for me, this whole introduction into exercising more of who we are through the vehicle of improv, because it does really gives you the opportunity to blow past your social self, just blow right past it. And so and Elisa, we're going to bring you back into this conversation in a minute, but I want to ask Bill about breaking the fourth wall and no, and be like, oh, please, right? This isn't a scene, this is dental work. Like what? So I would love it if you would talk a
Okay.
bit about that.
So, the fourth wall is the imaginary wall between you and the audience, right? You have the three walls behind you, and the fourth wall is that imaginary wall. And in acting, you're working with your partner, and this imaginary wall is a barrier between you and the audience because you're generally not speaking to the audience. However, there are times when you want to speak to the audience, and so that's what's called breaking the fourth wall. You go to the front of the stage and you basically talk to the audience. So when is that appropriate? Well, in our dramatical improv scenes that I've done the past several years, there are many moments there where there's very high drama, and the audience knows that there's something going on in the head of someone or emotionally someone, but yet they're not speaking it for some reason. Maybe it's not appropriate or whatever, and they're dying to know what's going on. So there is those moments where sometimes the actor will do it on his own, sometimes the director might make that request, where they would break the fourth wall. They would just pop out of the scene, walk up to the front of the stage, and say something like, "Oh my God, I hate this person. Why do I have to keep talking to him?" Or something like that, that they're thinking that they're not speaking, but the audience can feel it. So when they come out to the fourth wall, they're confirming what the audience is feeling, and the audience feels, okay, yes, I'm really connected to this person, I get it. And then they go back into the scene, and of course, their partner pretends like they never heard that, of course, and they continue the scene. So it's a very dramatic moment. It's very tricky to do right. But
Yeah.
but it's a very dramatic moment, yeah.
Well, I think this is interesting because there's so many ways in which third-party situations arise where there's a dynamic between two people and neither one of them is giving anything to the other.
Yeah.
This is also sometimes known as marriage.
Okay. Most of us have experienced that.
Yeah, I think so. Or maybe will,
Yeah.
figure it out and not have to do that. But in that dynamic, this is the kind of energy where I'm talking about creative conflict, right? So there's so many areas in which we're used to and familiar with that. And this is the third party. This is, you're giving me nothing, I'm going to give you nothing. You're not giving me, I'm not, And then I've seen this happen so many times in life breaks the fourth wall. Mm-hmm. And life goes, boom, you got to move this. So here, go move it with this other person.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Go move it with the other person.
Yeah.
And then person over here is pretending like they don't know what's going on, which isn't real. They know exactly what's going on, but they haven't had the courage to let go of the social self that would allow the giving exchange to actually take place.
Yes.
So yes, and this happens in companies. This happens in the men's room, in the women's room, by the water cooler, where somebody is going to break the fourth wall.
Uh-huh.
Why? Because human beings are not comfortable with ambiguity.
Right.
It has to be this, or it has to be that.
Mm-hmm.
That dealing with the emotional space of ambiguity takes tremendous maturity. Mm-hmm. And I know very few people who are equipped to deal with that. So how life gives us the energy is like, okay, just break the wall, go ahead, and then deal with the consequences.
Right. Yes, the energy is the pressure that builds until something pops. And by the way, for all of the listeners here, I believe you also are not saying that conflict is a bad thing, especially in marriage or any relationships, but in the sense that what brings out the issues for us and shines a light on it. In fact, many spiritual traditions teach that the biggest reason for marriage is to shine a light on the issues that we each have, because we're so intimate with each other, so that we can improve and learn, etc. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Oh yeah, I think that anybody who, it's good clarification. Anybody who knows me kind of would, and some people do who are watching this, know that I am about where's the energy. Yeah. And where is the energy? There's a thing that I have in the improv in my life. The line was, "Thank you for me, great spirit or source, for taking me where I would not choose."
Yes. Yeah.
So Elise, you can jump in now and respond, or but we have at some point we have an intention for Bill to share some of the skill sets, some of the techniques, some of the, what do we bring to this and how do we learn it? Okay, over to you, Elise.
Wow, great. This has been a great shareable wave. I'm completely blown away. I'm cracking up because as I'm listening, I'm going into your paper that you wrote about that wall, that fourth wall,
yeah,
and how you broke through it that first time. Do you want to share about that? When you said you had the stage fright, you were so full of energy. You didn't sleep the night before. Would you share that story so we could see how you kind of broke through it on
sure.
an improv angle?
Okay, yes. And the lesson from that story, by the way, is about getting to your truth. All right, as a more than breaking a fourth wall. But let me tell the story. So yeah, so doing that first improv, as I mentioned earlier, I couldn't sleep for 2 nights and I couldn't do my work. I mean, I'm saying, what am I doing? I'm crazy. I'm going to be on a New York stage. I have no idea what I'm doing. So we go to the theater, and it's the Jan Hus Theater in the Upper East Side, and I'm working with a woman. I know what the scene is about. I mean, this is the setting is what, and basically the director said, okay, there's this woman. She's a singer. When she was in her prime, you were madly in love with her, and now she's sort of beyond her prime, and now she's a singing teacher. So you're going to her to get a singing lesson, all right? But really, you just want to be with this person, right? So I said, fine. So I'm backstage, and I'm ready to go on because I know I'm next. So that's the only thing we know, by the way. That's the structure of the scene. And I'm going to go visit for her for a singing lesson. That's all we know, and then we have to do the scene. We have to improv the whole scene. So I'm backstage. I am nervous as could be. I mean, you know, I'm just scared to death, and I'm petrified. My hands are shaking. I haven't slept. And I said, okay, one of the things I learned these past couple of days is that I have to connect with my truth, all right? That's the only way these things work. So I said, okay, so what's my truth right now? Well, I'm nervous, I'm scared, I haven't slept well, etc. So I said, okay, I have to bring this somehow. And it turned out to be perfect because the first thing to do is I go on stage and I'm shaking like a leaf purposely and honestly, knocking on the door and walking in and saying, hello, listen, I'm so nervous about this lesson. You know, I've been thinking about this lesson for a week now. I haven't slept in 2 days. I can't work. I'm just so excited to be here. And so I connected with my truth. And then she replied to that, and then we were off to the races. So that was so critical, because if you go on stage with words that don't match your feelings, not only are you not giving anything to your partner, but you can't connect to the scene. You can't connect to your partner. So that was really, I felt pretty fortunate that, you know, my real feelings, you know, were able to be, you know, brought to the scene. And then she was a pro, and she was a very experienced actress. And so, you know, I just followed her lead after that, and we ended up having a fabulous scene. So does that answer your question? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, back to you, Anise. Go ahead.
Bill, I have a list here of some of the techniques that you list in your guiding document, and we're looking at skill sets, or how do we relax? How do we engage deep listening? Would you like to maybe touch on some of the ones that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so components, important components of improv, critical components, is one, preparation. And the way I'm presenting this is also is I can see that it works not only in theater but in business. But you know, so in theater it's called loading, right? Excuse me. It's basically a warm-up. In business we call it preparation, which is basically try to calm the body as much as possible. However you do that. Some people like to meditate. Some people like to go backstage and do push-ups for 5 minutes. Other people like to go backstage and just scream and, you know, get the energy out. In meetings, I don't know what people do in business. My experience, they don't do a lot. They really don't. I mean, they're looking at their notes and they're studying their notes, so it's really all a mental preparation, which is really only half the battle. You really have to prepare yourself emotionally and consciously for any meeting. So that's something that I I will want to teach them. So preparation, that's the first step. The next step, which is so immediate, is connection. Like if I'm on stage with somebody, no matter how much preparation I do, I'm still going to be nervous. I mean, it's just human. You know, still going to be nervous. And that's okay. You know, it's not a bad thing. It says that we're alive, our blood is pumping, and we're excited about this, right? But the way to speak meaningfully with that nervousness is to connect. Because if I don't connect with you, for example, I might just come out and say something very silly based on my nerves. So, hi, hey, how you doing? Oh, you look good. It'll be silly stuff, right? But instead, I have to really discipline myself to take a pause and just connect with you, eye to eye, heart to heart. And that takes discipline right there. To do that, most people are uncomfortable doing, and it's tough to do. And then once I make the connection, then I just start to look and listen. Like, okay, what's going on with Anais? You know, what am I feeling from her, et cetera? What am I feeling in myself? And so if you speak first, then it's deep listening to really feel what you're saying. And then I think of it as like an energy coming from you, whatever your sentiment is, coming into me and into my body. So I take a beat to really feel what you're saying, not just jump on your words and respond like we do a lot in business. And then once I have that, I have to do some self-assessment saying, okay, how am I reacting to that? Am I happy, sad, angry, or whatever? What's my authentic feeling? And then I respond back to you authentically. So it's a slower process, but so it involves some preparation, but mostly connection and mostly honoring the connection and feeling what's going on between the two of us and not listening to the mind, which is usually over here. That's the critical part. And then we just go back and forth with that dance. And if we do that, then you've got a pretty good improv. Several other minor details, but those are the critical ones in my view.
Cool. All right. So we have a couple more questions for you. I think that's really important because it's so many things that we end up in or choose or decide are pivotal to that moment. Yeah. And I think it also includes breaking the connection to yourself. And sometimes that's like, you know, and it's like, uh-oh, you're just like, oh, wait, wait a minute. And then there's a return to your sense of self, which is like, okay, where were we, you know? And so I think that for me was also part of the learning process of this improv was as part of the self-assessment was recognizing not only the connection, but recognizing when there was a glitch, a disconnect, and then I think making your partner great is about bringing that here.
Actually, making your partner great is what solves that problem. Yeah, because when do we disconnect? We disconnect, in my view, when we start thinking about ourselves, our worth, our consciousness, our whatever it is. It's something inside ourselves. But if we keep the focus on the other person by making them great, I think there's less chance of that internal disconnect. Yes.
Now, that's a skill set that Bill can teach you. He's really trained in it now. So that's amazing. And there are lots of ways to gather that information, but you've got to practice it. And what the new Shareable Wave that Bill is offering is understand that in its practical aspects, in your everyday life, in how you're relating and making important decisions in a really important business environment or leadership environment. So make sure that you, if this is valuable to you, that you get in touch with Bill, because this is his métier now. This is awesome. Okay, thanks, Bill. I mean, and in his guiding document, there are so many other things that are key to this process. And they're also, for me, they're really key to having a sense of spiritual connection and just general emotional intelligence. So over to you, Elise. We have a couple more questions for Bill. Thanks.
Right. So Bill, you know, it's really interesting, all your skill sets and what you're doing. I'm really pleased to be a part of this. So how would you create a safe space for honest dialogue in your business environment? Can you give us a little heads up with that?
Sure. I recently did a workshop. It's a 1 hour brief work. I can't call it a workshop, but a session, which is on negotiating tactics. That was sort of the topic. And the issue is basically, you know, with the client always wants a discount from you on a product, or they always want you to produce the product in 3 months when it really takes 6 months. Just demands that are inappropriate, right? So I worked with this organization, and in that case, we had to work with the dramatic form of improv, which is basically how to say no, which is really how to set a boundary. So there, the teaching was, how do you set a boundary while staying open and connected to this person? Okay, so that was the issue there. But in terms of connecting, in terms of a safe space, these are all people that were very self-conscious, all right, as you could imagine, you know, business people never having done this before, naturally. So what I did is I set them up in pairs and dyads, and around the room, had a nice big room. It said, go find your own special corner, and stay connected with your partner. In other words, keep the eye contact all the time, even throughout my instructions, which was difficult to do. And I know it is difficult to do. And I said, I'm asking you to do that for 2 reasons. Number one, I want you to stay connected to your partner. And number 2, if you're each looking at each other, nobody else is looking at you, all right? So the environment is safe. It's clean. You don't have to worry about self-consciousness. Nobody is seeing you. This is just between you and your partner. And they went with that. So they felt pretty safe with that. Okay, I'm working with this one partner, and it's going to go back and forth. So basically, you have an agreement with this person that, hey, we're both going to, you know, jump into this together. So the vulnerability is exchanged there, but only between 2 people, which is much easier than in a larger group. So that's one example of how we created a safe space there. But then, you know, that question, of course, has many levels to it. You know, in terms of other connections in business, such as employer-employee, all right, the employee has to use discretion. In other words, if they think badly of their boss, it might not be appropriate to be that, quote, authentic. And I do want to define here that authenticity doesn't mean a confessional, all right? So there's a difference. So you don't want to just go up to your boss and say, you know, I think you're ugly, and say, oh, that was authentic. No, it wasn't authentic. That was that might have been honest, but it was also stupid. So it was not authentic. So just a point about what authenticity means. Some people misunderstand that. So the safe space, what I will be encouraging managers to do especially is if an employee comes to them with an idea, it's so easy for the employer to say no. I mean, I get it, especially if they're busy, they don't like the idea, it's just a no off the bat. So I'm going to be encouraging them to say, yes, thank you for that idea. It's great that you're thinking about that. It's great that you're doing that. Let's explore that a little bit. But I'm in a meeting right now. How about we do that tomorrow? Okay. So at least the employee feels heard and acknowledged, even if the employee knows it's a bad idea, right? What is it going to take? The next day, it'll take another 5 minutes, 10 minutes to go through it and for them to see that it's not a good idea. So I want to help the employer also tell create that safer space and that more accepting space. But then also we have to show them where and when it's appropriate for the employee to speak their mind if they have something difficult to say. All right, and we know that in HR departments they have that, spaces to do that. But I want to teach especially the employers a little bit more about when and where that's appropriate, because there are times when, look, there's just no time for that. I got a 2-second answer, that's it. But the employee should know that there are other times and other places that we can have a deeper, more open conversation where people can be more open and more vulnerable. And in that regard, we're defining that as safety in some way because the time is right, the place is right, and there are some reasonable parameters on what's appropriate to say or not. So that's what I'm going to be helping people do in that regard.
Fantastic. And the employee winds up feeling valued, you know, like they're being heard, you know, and then that establishes that nice wave between employer and employee, you know, and I don't see that a lot out in the world now, especially when you're going into department stores and or even some small little mom and pop businesses or even, you know, other businesses. But so that this is very awesome logic that you're bringing up, you know, also with your heart and, you know, just based on all of your experience and your multi-talents. It's really fantastic. Thank you for that.
No, you're welcome.
All right, Anais, your turn.
Okay, so we're going to take this into a practical application, and it's an extension of a little bit of what you just shared with us. This is going to be a moment where we're asking, what does it look like in action? So here's the setup. You're a CEO or a leader, organization, of business. What is the role that being aware of heart connection plays in your leadership decisions? And how does this awareness show up in your day-to-day leadership style? Do you have a recommendation for us?
Just that's all with a simple question like that? Okay. So first of all, I think every CEO should understand that there's a heart as well as a mind. I mean, you know, there's many ways of dissecting the human. You know, some people dissect it in terms of that we have a physical component, emotional component, mental component, intuitive component, spiritual component. Others just divide it simply saying there's a mind and a heart. It doesn't matter how you do it, but the point is there's more than just the mind. All right, and unfortunately, that's not taught in universities or any schooling that we do. We're just taught informational content, which is basically mental, and therefore, you know, when we go on to the business world, we assume that that's what's important. That's the only thing that's critical. By the time someone becomes a CEO, hopefully they have learned that there's a lot more than that, than just the mind. All right. So in that regard, I would encourage every leader to understand that there's a mind and a heart. They're both needed. I mean, even industry leaders will say things like, well, when I have an important decision, you know, I'm going to sleep on it for a day. What does that mean? It really means that they're kicking in their right brain as well as their left brain. Right? So I think by the time people have gotten there, for the most part, they understand that there's something else besides the mind, whether they call it intuition, whether they call it the heart, or whatever. And if they don't, then I will teach that to them. But I think most of them know it. So if they do know it, my hope is that they're employing it in their work in a way that's appropriate. So if they're talking to their vice presidents, for example, hopefully they would employ both their mind and their heart, and not just look at the mind as the prize. Again, that's one of my criticisms about universities and teachings. You know, it's just about the mental, and I know that's personally for me, so maybe that's why I feel so strongly about it. But they do need to employ both of those. In terms of the wave, I mean, my goodness, I mean. I think, HR has gotten into so many new trainings. I mean, years ago, there used to be the team building training that they would go out in the weekend type of thing. So hopefully the improv training might be replacing that, or at least added to what they're doing right now. Many schools, of course, many organizations rather do other things in terms of yoga, meditation, etc. So it is getting out there in the world. So whatever we want to call that, we want to call that right brain, we want to call that heart, etc. But you know, I have many examples that I've studied where intuition and the heart is an important component of success, and so I do want to teach that to CEOs if they don't already know that, and to employ that, I think it comes from the top down. That's
a fantastic way to look at it, and I hope everyone who's watching this, you might want to timestamp that moment because you might want to go back and listen to that again. Now, this brings me to a follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about assumptions. I want to talk about the practice. It's part of the social self and the way that we're encouraged to develop, where we can collect a certain set of assumptions and then assume that everyone else is operating from that same basis of understanding.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm curious about is where in the improv journey is there a way to learn how to unpack the assumptions that are being brought either into the scene or into the dynamic, and they are not spoken about. I think this is a really critically important part of the communications aspect in both business and other walks of life, which is you walk into a room carrying a certain set of assumptions that are part of your social self or your spiritual self or your emotional life experience or your messed up childhood or your whatever, right? You're carrying these assumptions and you bring them with you. So I wonder if there's a specific technique that you're aware of that's, okay, we're in the room. Is it part of self-assessment that you check your assumptions at the door? Is it part of asking really great questions in the beginning, and even saying, you know, I'm walking into this space and these are the assumptions that I'm aware of. I wanted to bring that out because I want to make sure that we don't get off on the wrong footing because we're carrying different assumptions based on who we are and what we've learned and where we've come from. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things come to mind when you say that, Anais. One is just the communication technique of the imago therapy, where two people are speaking to each other, and they use this a lot in couples work. And when one person speaks, what the other person does is first repeat what they think they heard. They say, "This is what I heard you say. Is that accurate?" And it goes back and forth to make sure the communications are clear. All right, that's a Havel Hendricks work, which is phenomenal stuff. We don't do that in improv. I mean, I understand it helps wonderfully in the relationship world that he teaches. I know several people I've attended and other people that have. But in the improv world, we don't usually do that. I mean, if someone says something we don't really understand it, we might ask them, "What do you mean by that?" But we usually don't go there. Instead, what we usually do is go past that and use what we believe is true and move forward on that. But in terms of, you know, checking those emotions or the assumptions at the door, I think, again, focusing on the other person minimizes that, you know, because all of those things we talk about, you know, the disconnect that you talked about earlier, the internal disconnect and our assumptions and our issues and our past and et cetera, yeah, that all comes with us. And if we focus on ourselves, that's all there in the mix. But the less we focus on ourselves, in my view, and the more we focus on the other person, in my experience, that sort of goes away. Because if I'm working with you and I'm focusing on you and what you're doing and listening deeply to you and trying to sense what you're saying and what you're feeling, my stuff is way back here. It doesn't usually get involved very much. So I mean, I think that technique, you know, minimizes a lot. Now it does seep in, of course, maybe when I do self-assessment or whatever, but for the most part, the more I focus on you, the less that stuff interferes. That's what I find.
Great answer, and it's really a great segue for us because in the work that Elise and I do, a lot of what we're doing is the really down in the trenches work of what frees a person up to be able to set themselves aside or forget about it or like forget about it entirely, right? That is also, it's like the problem with universities where there's a certain way of things moving along and being done. And I think that in general, in education, that's a part I see clients all the time. The reason they are coming to me is because they don't know how to do that. No one has ever shown them how to do that. They very rarely seen it modeled, and they have no idea how to get themselves on that trajectory. So I'll do that, and then I'll pass them over to you. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So Elise, I think we have one more question. Yeah.
I really don't have any more questions. Do you have anything? I'm like satiated here, and
I do.
keep cutting in and out. We're having a bad storm coming,
okay.
so I don't know if I'm going to lose you again.
Well,
Go ahead.
It is what it is, right? So you've been great. You know, it is what it is.
Preparing.
Yeah.
Preparing.
Yeah. So here's I'll start here, but these are quick questions. Would you recommend improv as a basic life skill?
Yes.
Would you recommend improv to law enforcement?
Sure.
New parents?
Yeah.
Healthcare providers?
Yes, yes, yes. I can't imagine anyone that it would not benefit in some way.
Okay.
And it would benefit different people in different ways, but it's basic communications. It's conscious communications, essentially. And who doesn't need that?
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
What advice would you offer to people going into business today, you know, our millennials or their graduates coming out of university, with regard to any internal impulse they may be feeling within themselves to transform themselves and include that transformational process in a business model or venture, or to feel inclined to want to walk into an environment and transform glaring dysfunctions in their workplace? What advice would you offer?
Yeah, well, I think if they study improv or psychotherapy or whatever training they would like to learn more about themselves and their truth, that's the essence of all of those questions you just asked. Because once you really learn the basis of who you are, the essence of what your joys are, what inspires you, what moves you, then you can honestly move forward in all of those ways. So if you determine that you want to bring that to the business world and help the structure of business, bring it there. If you might determine with that you're in the wrong line of work. But whatever that is, if you find your truth and your essence inside of you and what your true inspiration is, and bring that to all of those places, it'll be quite positive.
Awesome. Okay, so I think that completes our conversation with Bill Prinzivalli. Bill, what is the name of your new venture? Do you have a name chosen for it?
Actually, yes. It's a creative business improv.
Creative Business Improv. And the website will be?
That, www.creativebusinessimprov.com.
Okay, so now you have that information and you want to get in touch with Bill. I want to thank Elise for joining me in this, because these conversations, I mean, we have a lot of fun because we're interested in whatever we bring somebody on, we're actually really interested in, or we wouldn't bring you. So Elise, thank you. And Bill, really appreciate your generosity and making this a really, I think, an easy and fun conversation. And now we are going to do an improv moment because I've made a mistake. Okay?
There are no mistakes.
It's a mistake. It's cool. I'm fine with it. But so I just wanted to include this as stuff happens. So what I'm going to do is we're going to say farewell and thank you very much to all of you who are tuning in and watching this on Bill's website or on our Patreon page or wherever. And what's the mistake, right? What's the mistake? We're going to have to re-record the intro because although I pushed record, I didn't select on the computer or in the cloud. So the introduction didn't get recorded. So Bill, if you can hang on another 3 minutes, we can get through that. But this is what it is. This is what happens, right?
Perfect.
Okay. So those of you who joined us for this episode, thank you so much. And please do reach out to us. If you know somebody who's doing something amazing with any transformational energy in any walk of life, please get in touch with us. We'd love to really talk to them and perhaps have them on the podcast, because we're growing and there's so many wonderful things happening out there in our new world. Okay, cool. So I'm going to say farewell, and you guys can say whatever last words and bye-bye you want to say.
I just want to thank you, Anais and Elise. I mean, you guys have an interest in this work. The work you're doing is beautiful. I admire it so much, and thank you for this time.
Thanks, Bill. It was great. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the next Shareable Wave.